David, thanks for your time. The idea now is that we're just going to talk about David's book, or at least Mark as centered around David's book, because I want to use this, got this idea of using this in the Winchcombe C3 church men's group. And so the idea is that we use the book, which has been designed for a study sort of course, and that's what the deal is here. So David, over to you.
Well, thanks, Tim. You know, one of the reasons I wrote this book is Mark's Gospel is one of my very favorites. And a couple of reasons for that. First of all, Mark's Gospel is commonly accepted to be the recollections of the Apostle Peter. First-hand accounts that he related to young Mark and who wrote them down into this great gospel that we have today. And what I like so much about Mark is it's in your face, no holds barred, the warts aren't airbrushed out. You get Jesus and his disciples just like they were. And it's a very exciting book. It's packed with action. A third of Mark's Gospel relate to the miracles and signs that Jesus performed. And again, what makes it so exciting is the Gospel of Mark teems with life. And the personality of the Apostle Peter just comes bursting off the pages. When you see Jesus doing these things, it's very easy to picture Peter relating this story to Mark, you know, about something he saw with his own eyes. Yeah. He saw Jesus turn a few loaves of bread and fish into food for 5,000 people, and then for 4,000. You know, he saw Jesus raise this little girl from the dead. He saw Jesus, you know, walking down the road, and this woman come up and just reach through the crowd and touch him. And Peter was the one who said, "What do you mean, who touched me?" Yeah. With all these people pressing around you, what do you mean, who touched me? How can you ask that question, Jesus? And then being kind of embarrassed when this woman came and threw herself before him and said, "Well, you know, I was dying and I just got healed." So it's a marvelous gospel. And so what I've done in this book, Miracles in Mark, is examine each one of the signs, each one of the miracles that Jesus performed. The Greek word comes from our word for dynamite. It's dunamis. And so each miracle is an act of power that Jesus performs. And you know, we deal with each one in depth. We discuss the miracle, but we also look at why. Why did Jesus perform the miracle? Why did he do what he did? You know, what's the significance of the miracle? And really, what we lead up to is the fact that the most important sign, the most important miracle, is the crucifixion itself. That's God's greatest sign to mankind. So, look forward to discussing this more with you later.
Excellent, thank you for that. In reading the book, I've already shared with you, David, that I had plans to go out over the weekend when I was in Athens last, and actually this book kept me inside for the whole weekend. It was really that compulsive. One of the it's quite clear that there's a lot of insight around each miracle, which is just in itself is amazing. But also, what I found was that I actually got a much better understanding about Jesus as a person and really his compassion. I think you make the point in there that you know, Jesus had an amazing amount of compassion for the individual people. Is there anything you want to say about Jesus' compassion?
Well, you know, and I think that's right, because I think it goes back to the question of why did Jesus perform miracles? And I think really what it comes back to was because he loves people. He came to seek and to save that which was lost. It's in Mark's Gospel where Jesus confronts the Pharisees who ask him, you know, why are you doing all these things? Why are you hanging out with all these people? He said, look, it's not the people that are well that need a doctor, but it's those who are sick. Yeah. And he's talking about those who are physically sick, but also those who are spiritually sick. Yeah. And there's an incredible correlation in Mark's Gospel especially between the physical and the spiritual. In fact, there's a couple of places where people who come and get healed, Jesus tells them, your faith has made you whole. Mm. And in the Greek, what he's actually saying is, you've become a new person. Yeah. Your faith has not only given you a physical healing, but you've also been healed spiritually as well.
Wonderful, thank you for that. One of the things I found interesting, very interesting, was that in Mark you make the point that when Jesus was baptized by John, that God's words were aimed towards Jesus. Not the crowd, but towards Jesus as an individual. Whereas some of the other Gospels actually refer to the crowd, as though God was talking to the crowd rather than specifically to Jesus. And then you tie that in then with his crucifixion. So there was the opening up and the commissioning by God of Jesus, and then through Jesus' choice, the end of that commission. That's just so much you could just talk about there. But for me, do you believe then that when Jesus was standing there, I think in the river, and he was being baptized, he didn't know right up to the last second before God appeared and said, "You are my son"? Was that the first time he knew that he was God's son?
Well, what I think is, and I think this is probably borne out by looking at all the Gospels, but I think there was this ongoing awareness of the call of God. I think as Jesus grew up, there was a certain amount of self-understanding in Luke's Gospel, where at 12 years old he's in the temple with a priest, and when his parents came in, he said, well, didn't you know that I had to be about my Father's business? So there was a certain amount of self-awareness there spiritually, and I think what he was experiencing was this ongoing revelation of his call. But I think at the baptism, when God commissioned him, I think that was the final piece in the puzzle of the
Yes.
work. Because we know that Jesus was fully God and he was fully man. We know that, but at the same time, we have to understand that he was fully man. The divinity didn't cancel out the humanity. So as a man, he was coming to an awareness of who he was, and he was working through his relationship with God, just as we have to do. Just as we have to wrestle with God's call on our lives, or what's God calling me to do in the future. And he wrestled with that. And I think this was the final culmination when he was baptized in obedience. And God said, "This is my son with whom I'm well pleased." And he saw the heavens open. He saw the heavens ripped open. And what's interesting is the word there that's used for rip, when it says the heavens were torn open, is the same word that's used later in the letter when Jesus is crucified. And it says the curtain in the temple, which separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, was ripped from top to bottom, signifying an open heaven, signifying an ability to interact with God now.
Fantastic.
So yeah, very powerful.
Fantastic. And one final thing, just choosing one of the miracles, you talk about the fig tree. And I think there's an alternative idea there about what Jesus actually intended in terms of the fig tree and why he basically cursed it and made it wither and die. I did talk a little bit about that.
Well, and this is one that scholars have talked about and debated, and the thing about the fig tree, when Adam and Eve sinned, the first thing they did was they realized they were naked. They realized that they were exposed, and so they tried to make coverings for themselves. And so the coverings that they made were out of fig trees, out of fig leaves. And so in a very real sense, it's interesting, it's very significant that Jesus, when he sees the fig tree and sees that it's not bearing fruit, he curses it. And, there's other significance to the fig tree. The fig tree also represents the nation of Israel. The fig tree represents the nation of Israel throughout the scriptures, and Jesus saw that they weren't bearing fruit, and there was a curse there. But I think the bottom line is, we can't cover ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't create our own righteousness. Back in the Genesis account, God realized that they had made coverings for themselves, but that wasn't good enough, and so he went and actually killed animals and shed blood and made coverings for them, which again foreshadows into the New Testament what's going to happen on the cross.
Excellent. David, well, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Tim.
We really look forward to doing this course.
Absolutely.
We've got to figure out the final timings or whatever, and what we really want to do is to make it go through the whole course, and then at the end of it, it will culminate in yourself, if we can organise it, yourself and Annie coming over, and I can see us having a good half day at least, going through anything we discovered in the meantime. So you're up for that?
I look very forward to it, Tim.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.